Hi, everybody. Welcome to Keep It Spiritually Simple. I'm your host, Sandra McEllis, and we've got some more treats for you with Dr. Nancy going over her book, Ascendance. So we're kind of going page by page and going through the inserts that she has downloaded. This is actually a book that you could look right through and, boom, pick one that applies to you. But for this particular podcast, we're just kind of going in order. And I have not heard them before. So we kind of bounce back and forth intuitively with what I translate from it or what pictures I get intuitively. And Nancy does a brilliant job bouncing right back with me. So make sure you hit subscribe, like, and share so that you don't miss any of these episodes. All right, let's get started. Page 9, Dr. Nancy, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome.
All right, I'll go ahead and read it and then we'll talk about it.
Okie dokie.
Each morning, wake up and remember you are a soul on an assignment here on earth. You are on a mission for service to the divine plan. Keep the awareness that you are not from here. You are a foreigner in a foreign land and just a temporary visitor. I think this is such a great reminder because a lot of times we just get lost in time and space and matter here on planet Earth. And it's good to check in and just remember we're on assignment here. And I think that's good because it kind of is a good remembering. And so that we don't get lost in the waking dream. And then we're like, ah, yes, I'm on assignment. And yeah, and I think it's a good way for us to not just start our day, but it's a our perspective changes that day.
Mm-hmm. And I think when we go back to our younger selves, many of us could pinpoint where we thought, this is all different and foreign to me. I don't know that I'm supposed to be here, but we have no conscious connection to that thought, at least for me as a kid. I used to look at the 7 people in my family, and even though we resembled each other, I didn't feel like I belonged, right? Like I didn't belong in there. And of course, I had an older sister who must have recognized it because she continually said all through, um, my childhood, you're an alien. You don't belong in this family. I used to think, well, where am I supposed to go? I don't understand. I mean, to the point where I literally asked my mother where I'm from. But she would say, look, you're so different. Your eyes are sunk in. You're different. And I'd be like, I am? I don't know. So not until I've really gotten older do I realize that we are just temporary visitors here. We have a hall pass, right? An earth pass to come
Mm-hmm.
here and to visit and to explore either with open eyes and eagerness to want to learn and experience, or we come in and follow the matrix or the program and become part of the herd and don't really get all of our sensories involved.
Mm-hmm.
you know at least that's what's coming up for me. So
No, I'm glad you bring that up. I think a lot of us feel that way. I think there's a lot of us, I'm sure, in the audience that have felt that way, that we didn't fit in the status quo box because we weren't meant to fit in the status quo box. We weren't meant to really fit in. I mean, we chose to forget when we came here. And so that we could get lost in the dream and really get absorbed into this whole feeling of time, space, matter, duality, and have get just dive into this experience we call life in physical form. And then as we get older, then all of a sudden, spirit's like, okay, it's time for the switch to be turned on and for you to remember why you came here and what is your purpose work, and then just remember who we are as divine beings on temporary assignment here on Earth. So I think that many of us on the planet are waking up, and I do believe there's a lot of forces that is trying to keep a lot of us from waking up. And but that doesn't matter. I mean, with the high frequencies and the photon and the solar storms and the CMEs and the light coming in from source into not just this galaxy, but this part of the local universe, it's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, and we look at ourselves and we may not figure out our purpose in the logical earth way of purpose, right?
Yeah.
But the way I have learned for me is that I am a specific frequency, whatever that is. So I'm here and I'm anchoring that into earth and I'm tethering it into earth, right? So there's like this cord, but then there's many people out there that are like me, right?
Mhm.
That are just here anchoring that energy. And there's enough of us here on the planet now where it's creating this movement of the cords so that we're starting to remember, hey, I'm a powerful being. And hey, I don't want to be a part of that program. Or wow, I had no idea that I was part of that program. Now I choose to maybe step away from it. So again, that's where we step into the experience of our visiting time, our earth pass, you know, because we
Yes.
don't know how long we're going to be here, and we may not really know what our direct purpose is in the logical mind purpose, right? But we're not going to know that till we start asking ourselves the questions.
Yes. And I think that's where it gets exciting for a lot of people in their life when they do start asking those big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Why here? Why now? Where do I come from? Where do I go when I take my last breath? And then they start realizing, hey, this life is important and I really need to make the most of it. And what is the significance about my life here and how many lives I touch? And also that there's so many of us that are higher light beings that anchor our light. We're like boots on the ground. We came here to come into physical form and really be a part of humanity and walk amongst humanity, but to also anchor in our light to a very dark world. And with that comes a lot of challenges in being in the earth school, but we learn so much ourselves. And I think part of the challenge is what sharpens the sword as part of our assignment here with what is it? There's an expression I said in one of my books, and it says, well, in order to be a general, you have to have had experience on the battlefield. And so a lot of us come out with all these battle scars, but then after a while you're proud of the battle scars because that shows you actually were on the battlefield and it's service to the divine plan. And so yes, I believe that it's part of our assignment here. And when we cross over, we'll say, wow, that was a crazy, wild place, that I had to, experience there in the Earth School. But boy, did I learn a lot on the battlefield.
Well, I'm laughing because before you brought up the battlefield and the general being a soldier, I was getting this visual of like this giant helicopter, and you'll see it in the movies where they're all jumping out and sliding down the rope, right, with all their equipment. So I'm seeing it as like an invisible helicopter, but you're jumping down the rope, but the rope is actually your light, your frequency, your cord, but you're wearing these giant rubber boots so that when you get onto the ground, you anchor and you're holding onto that cord of light. And then you went into soldier, and I'm like, of course she just did.
We're
Of course she just
on
brought
the
that
same
up.
wavelength here.
Yes, exactly. Because we really bounce back and forth with very similar things, and yet we're across the United States from each other.
Yeah.
Funny. It's
Yeah.
funny. All right, let's go on to our next one.
Okay, so detachment brings freedom from all physical, emotional, and mental states. Observation of real from unreal produces detachment. And I practice this when I'm in a very difficult, challenging situation. I can see myself totally immersed in this situation and I'm like, okay, hold on, back up. Let's just take a break from this and look at this from a higher perspective. I'm here on the earth school. I'm in assignment. I'm a divine being in physical form, and recognizing real from unreal, that this is just part of the waking dream. It's real when you're in it, but when you take your last breath and you wake up and you cross over to the other side of the veil and you go, what was that? Well, that was just a dream. avatars, as you like to say, we're avatars.
Hmm.
And so I think that helps because the intensity of this life can be so overwhelming and challenging that we just are like, we need to take a breath and take a break and then just kind of remember I'm this divine being, I'm in physical form, I'm here in the earth school, and these are situations I find myself in. And I think it really raises our perspective where we're like, okay, now we take it seriously, but not to the point where we're hyperventilating and we're stressed out, because then we could just call in our spirit guide and say, okay, I need some help with this situation. You're not alone in this situation. But I think for me, it really helps allow me to just refocus and feel the comfort of, okay, that's why it is so challenging, because the density is so intense here, and there's so many souls that are not awake and they're struggling for survival, they're stressed out, they're trying to get through their day. And a lot of times we get caught up in that emotion or those feelings that we're feeling on earth. It's just the other day I was taking a shower and all of a sudden I got so nauseous where I was like ready to almost throw up in the shower. And I'm thinking, well, where is this coming from? Where am I getting this? And I think many of us right now on this planet, because of all the CMEs and the solar storms and all this intense energy that's coming to our planet, photon light, the intensity, that it's really for those of us who are very sensitive, it affects us. And so when I was checking in to my higher self, I was like, well, what is that all about? And I got out of the shower, I got a drink of water, and they said, well, because there's so much darkness on this planet, you feel it. You feel the intensity of all of the darkness and the corruption and murders and all this, things that souls are having to go through. And so for a lot of us, we don't realize how this energy can affect us deeply and even into our physical form. And so I do what I call a light cleanse, and where you just close your eyes and you vision this pillar of light, this white golden light. And it's almost like I call it a light bath, where it's a light flush, where it just goes right completely over you, through you. It's like a shower of light. And then it's just this, it just cleanses a lot of this, because we don't always realize how much we're deeply affected. And we also don't realize how much our light, and a lot of times we're on assignments at nighttime. So when we're waking up, we may not be fully in our bodies. If you're dropping a lot of things in the morning, you're maybe not completely have gotten back into your physical form. Especially if you're doing special ops for the light and service to the divine plan at night. So for those that may not be familiar with us, the body is the one that needs to rest, but soul doesn't rest. It's always traveling and off to these different dimensions and assignments. And so, have you had any of these experiences, Sandy? Can you relate to some of these?
I can relate to some of them. I know for me, I go through phases where I remember nothing, when I awaken, or I toss a lot and I go in and out of like another realm. There have been times where I've been in caves with what looks like a foreign army suit on, or some kind of
Mm,
brigade thing, that I'm battling something, and literally gotten up in the morning with a scratch on my arm,
mm,
that there's no way I could have personally have done it,
right.
right? But it happened in the dream. And then recently, just lots and lots of conversations where I'm in full blown conversation. And it makes total sense because I'm coming in that twilight, waking up. Um, and I'm in full blown conversations, and it'll make sense or not make sense. But then I'll wake up and I go, oh, okay. And then within about 15-20 minutes, I remember nothing of it,
Mm,
unless I had gotten up and written it down. So I asked Spirit that if there was something that they wanted me to remember, ask me to write it down. And I will do so. If not, bring it back into my awareness if I need to elaborate on it. So I really don't hold a lot of stock in what I do when I sleep, but there are times where I think I've gotten a good night's sleep and I wake up and I feel like I worked out all night,
hmm
and I
Yeah.
will ache. I will be like, what in the world?
Yes, you're not alone with
Or what
these
out of this world?
scratches
Where
and
did I go?
bruises.
Yes.
Like, how can you get a bruise in your sleep? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
obviously, so a lot of people will have these feelings of where they are in battles.
Hmm.
And even in the Bible, it talks about in Ephesians chapter 6, it talks about the spiritual warfare, the spiritual battles that take place between light and darkness. And because we are divine beings, a lot of times we have multiple assignments. It's not just here on earth is our only assignment because we're such vast beings. We can have multiple lifetimes going on, whether it's in different timelines, different dimensions, that type of thing. So, yeah, yeah, it's more common than I think people realize or talk about.
Oh, I agree with you. And I think the more we awaken to some of the real hidden agenda possibilities, and then we think, all right, well, I don't consent to this. And I know I'm fully protected, but I'm going to figure out how to fully protect better. I like your idea of telling people how to do a cleaning and clearing of your energy and bringing in that light column, giving yourself,
Mhm.
your body, an intentional energy flush is as important as doing a physical flush, because
Mhm.
we can overdo the physical flushing. Oh, I've got bugs, I've got to do the this parasite, it's all over social media. Oh, I've got to take this particular nutrient because it's all over social media. And so we get caught up in that, in the physical flushing, but we're not stopping and thinking about, what am I doing to clear or infuse and strengthen and stabilize my energetic energy?
Yeah, you bring up a great point because we're affected by a lot of thought forms, mind control, a lot of this stuff through movies, music, TV, news, you name it. It's just out there, and it's also in the airwaves as well. And it's a real thing. And so also for us to be energetically protected is important. Um, but I still think the highest level is staying in our beingness, staying at the highest frequency possible. Because when we're at the highest frequency, a super high frequency, we become distasteful to entities and that are always flying around, whether it be, in the form of thought forms or, actually what some people call dark angels, the adversary. I mean, we're definitely not, we are in a lower kingdom. And even Jesus had to recognize this and deal with this himself when Lucifer approached him 3 times and tempted him to switch sides, go from service to the light to service to darkness, and so he recognized this wasn't his kingdom. He was definitely in a lower kingdom where the dark angels reside, and it's not something to be fearful about. It's just something to be aware of. That where are we? We're not, this isn't our home. We're not from here. We don't stay. We're temporary visitors. And just to kind of be aware, because a lot of times we're distracted. And so we don't understand what is going on with our emotions, our thoughts. Those are can all be manipulated by through energy and frequency. I mean, we've already know that, these cell phone towers or in the electrical grid, if you're near some of these electrical plants and stuff, is allowing people to have brain cancers and all this other stuff. That's a proven fact. And so it's these frequencies could have been, and I've talked to electrical engineers and scientists who have said in just private conversations, like, why can't they put the frequencies at a healing frequency, not at a detrimental frequency? And I think that's just probably for further discussion as far as, when we're talking about this corruption and darkness that pervades on the planet. And so not everything is in the best interest of humanity and is designed that way. And so I think that's where a lot of people are really waking up and saying, this just isn't acceptable. We really need to change these things because we can put healing frequencies in the cell phone towers. and also in a lot of different frequencies that we have, whether it's microwaves, x-rays, and all this stuff. But so I believe that as the earth changes, that that is going to be a part of our changes as well. We're always looking at the different systems, but I think also we're going to start looking at frequencies, because it even affects the animals and the birds as well. um, so yeah, what is your feelings on that, Sandy?
Well, what I'm getting is we already know about the warfare on that because, if you're paying attention, you're going to hear videos about, a frequency being put out that maybe altered a thought process, or frequencies that went out that maybe killed a certain species, but other species lived, right?
Mm,
So, I mean, we do not see these frequencies, just like you could sit there in front of your microwave and stare and you're not going to see it. You could turn the light on in your oven and you're not going to see the heat, cooking
mm,
you're just going to see the result of it, right? So we do not see air unless we see the effects of air. For example, it's on our face, the wind is blowing, the chimes are ringing, right? We don't
mm,
see any of that. So if you look at frequencies as if it is air, there all these a lot of these frequencies are not heard, just like there's certain frequencies only a dog can pick up, right? um and it's just interesting, and every species is a little bit different and has their own lead within, whether it's their eyesight, their smell, their taste, or they sense etherically. These frequencies can affect anything and everyone, and there's constantly, we're in warfare while they're testing these
mhm.
things, right? They're
Yeah.
just testing them.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up testing because we are now, people are starting to hear about this. Some people may already know about this, but before they dropped the atomic bomb in World War II, they tested it in New Mexico. And there was a lot of people who had radiation poisoning as a result of the testing that was done in New Mexico prior to it getting on the planes and being two of them dropped over Japan. So uh, the effects are still there, and then I think it affect the different generations of birth defects and things of that nature. So, but yes, things are constantly being tested, and in fact, some of these psych ops and things like this on humanity are tested to see. And I think it's come out that even COVID was in a way a testing to see how humanity would, how would they react when they're forced to stay in their homes for a couple of years and not interact. And so yes.
Or told, in order to interact, you're going to need to take a in the arm or wherever you choose, in order to keep your job, in order to go to a grocery store, in order to travel. I mean, this is what that whole test was about.
Mhm.
And look at the majority of people. I think my thing was, I wasn't real sure of all the things that were going on, but I knew something was coming. So when I stood back and watched it as an observer, and I
Mhm.
was doing my best to be neutral, and I knew nothing was going to affect me. The biggest shock for me was watching people fall in line, was watching how many people fell in line
Mhm.
and how many people took on that belief system. Now, was that a frequency of subliminal that had been going out prior, where there are a lot of warnings? So a certain amount of the population was, yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes, I'm ready. Yes, I absolutely have to. And then
Mhm.
believing it with all of their being. And
Yeah.
others were like, well, hold up a second. And then others were like, absolutely not. So you saw where the majority is, but now what you're seeing is at least 50% of that majority have now flipped over to, wait a second, no shame, blame, or guilt about, they're falling into that path, but have woken up to it. So, you know, I think that we're using all kinds of warfare in our foods, our medicines, our frequencies, and things that we don't even know about,
Yeah.
and we're getting a lot of our history shown to us, by a lot of people that are digging a little bit deeper into history. I heard something the other day about, um, Pearl Harbor. All the generals of everywhere knew it was going to occur, but nobody stepped in to stop it. like certain people knew about it, right?
Ah,
Yeah, and I was like, wow, that's
wow.
one of many, many things that are starting to awaken, that our history that we've been told
Mm.
is not the history that is, right?
Yeah, a lot of what's in the history books has been edited and
Yes.
altered, and so, but yeah, manipulation and
Mm-hmm.
is definitely alive and well. And I think
Yeah.
that it's good that people, excuse me, question authority, because authority has been abused their power. And so now people are like, wait, I don't know. Let me do my research first before I make a decision. And that's where neutrality is very important, because then you're not this or that. You're looking at it in a neutral position, and you're looking at both sides. Like, well, this has good options, but this one has good options, and they don't realize there's actually a third position, and that's neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the fourth state, which is ether, which is spiritual state, where you're now the observer and you're looking at it from an overall perspective. Because then people go, okay, well, then I have three choices. I have right, left, or I have neutral. But then there's also the fourth state, which is and a lot of people don't talk about this, but the fourth state is spiritual level, is at a spiritual level where you are above the three lower states, and you can actually see it from that higher perspective.
Yeah, and when you were talking about questioning or authority and things like that, I don't know how old you are, but I'm just going to say this about me. My mother, had us in the 50s, right? Late 50s. We're all of us kids are baby boomers.
Mm,
Her generation didn't question the church, the parents.
mm,
You didn't ask questions. It was just inappropriate. And so when we were raised, it wasn't about the questions. And even when you were in school in a classroom, you could only ask a question if the teacher said, does anyone have any questions? Because if you raised your hand in between something because you didn't understand it, you were a problem, right?
mm,
Um, but now what we've evolved into is the next generation of many people starting to question, because people are starting to reveal, hey, wait a second, that didn't make any sense. That didn't happen. If you
mhm.
look at all the assassinations, you can tell many of them came from above and were planned. And that's all coming out now, right? So there's a lot of this hidden agenda that we're not aware of. And I think for anyone who wants to get into the world of ascendance, right? And they're going to look at things maybe with a little more of an open mind, like, wait a second, let me just see what unravels here, if it makes sense to me, right? So they're more open to hearing versus closed, what generations before us were. Like, there's many things I could never bring up to my mother. If it wasn't written in that Bible and taught to her, you're not going to question her, because
Mhm.
that is her deep in-seated belief system, where someone like me wants to question, and then my children question, right?
Mhm.
And so the generations are sort of changing, which is wonderful to see, because we're expanding beyond the borders, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
taking the fences down.
Yes.
Yeah, we're opening up the cage. Sorry, I could
Yeah.
keep going. These analogies are,
Oh yeah, the cage. Oh
we're taking
gosh.
the swords out of the heart. All right, let's go.
Okay, so our next one is when the student feels the effects of the magnificent sound current going through their beingness, deep seated grooves of set behavioral patterns are transformed into spiritual wisdoms. The word that the Bible talks about is the powerful sound current of source that flows continuously, showering love and heals and brings gratitude for being a unique expression, and experiences peace that surpasses the understanding of the conscious mind. After this mystical experience, the spiritual student knows this transformation is now a reality. there's a lot in here because the sound is called variety of different things. I go deeper into this in my first book, Our Divinity Revealed, which we've not gotten into on
No,
your
we
show,
have
but
not.
we will at some point. But Ascendance is so rich in topics here that I'm glad that we're staying with Ascendance for a while. But the sound current is the audible life stream, the life force. In many cultures, they called it chi and prana, and also Pythagoras coined it music of the spheres. There's all these different expressions for this source, this life force that comes from source. And um, and so the word is just one of the things that was translated to go into the Bible, as in the beginning was the word, and the word was God, and the word was with God. It's the life force of source of God. And so because it came before time, matter, and space in this dimension, down here in the third dimension. So now that we're talking about the life force of source, how it continually showers, heals, and is our unique expression, because soul is made from source, which is part of this word, audible life stream, sound current, life force, and experiences when it gets in touch, back in touch with this sound current, it just flattens our ego. I mean, it's just how our soul just drinks this in, because we've been away in this reality, in a sense, from home. And so it's almost like we're tapping in and we're touching into this source frequency, and it just is intoxicating. It really is such a divine mystical experience that people can't really express it, and that's why they have to experience it, because you can't put it into words. It needs to be experienced. And so when people have these direct mystical experiences on the inner, sometimes it happens on the outer, but it literally is transforming a person's life, because they've purified their ego. They go through their life. You'll see this with a lot of NDEs, near death experiencers, people who've crossed over the veil, people who've done sacred plant medicines, who've had these deep mystical experiences, and it forever changes them. And it really not just wakes them up from the dream here in this third dimensional holographic matrix reality we have, but it also reminds them of their beingness and their true nature and their connectedness with source. And so therefore, the a lot of times the ego, it doesn't even know how to handle this. And so it really, that's why I say it definitely flattens the ego, because now the ego has a taste of this sound current, and it just forever, it rolls over and forever serves the higher self. So in the beginning, a lot of times we're running around serving our ego, and yet as we get higher and higher into this state of beingness and these higher frequencies, that it just it puts it into, it's this frequency really calms the ego down, and the ego just loves this frequency to the point where it just surrenders to the higher self, and therefore it serves the higher self, instead of the higher self serving it. It ends up turning around, and you'll see this with a lot of people. They'll change their profession, they'll move to a different place they feel called to, more of a frequency match. People fall away from their life to open up space for new people to fall in their life. And so I think it's just part of our journey on this mystical spiritual path. And I think that when we get on a deeper spiritual path, these things starts happening, because we're now exposing ourselves to these higher frequencies.
Yeah, and I was trying to think when you were explaining all that what that feels like, but it almost just feels like this. I don't know how to explain it except for you're on a plane of an inner knowing,
Mm.
and you look at things very differently. Um, Not so much in the priority or the order of importance of your day, but you're positioned within that. throughout
Mm,
the day is different. Your
mhm,
responses are different. Your process is different. And there's I would call it an inner peace for me, just much
mhm,
more of a peaceful feeling, and a certainty of my inner knowing, right? Even if I can't
yeah.
explain it into words, which is why I usually zip it most of the time, because I can't explain my feeling or the videos that are going on in my head, right? And
Mhm,
sometimes that information is just for me to know. It's just for me to learn to translate. And when I can communicate it, even though it doesn't make any sense to me, it usually blows the other person away. And it's frequency, not so much that what I said made this profound, thing. It's the frequency in which I go to explain it. So, this mystical experience and being a spiritual student is a never ending thing while we're here on this planet. You may level up, you may switch levels. All levels are just as important.
mhm,
There is no upper or lower, but ever as you are, supposedly climbing a ladder just to the next level, you're hanging out there for a while and you're learning on that plateau for a little while, right? That platform until you plateau and go to the next one. But all those experiences and everything go with you and broaden this inner knowingness, right? That's
mhm.
just, I don't know how I said that, but that's
Well,
how I feel
it's
about it.
profound, actually. It's well put.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, because some of these states are hard to put into words.
Mm-hmm.
We're just, and like you said, it's a frequency. And, a lot of times, people say they want to be in front of someone who is at these higher states, whether it be, a lot of them have left the planet, but mystics and saints. And for those that have had the opportunity to be in their presence, a lot of times they didn't even have to say anything. Just being in
Right.
their presence, it was the frequency of the transfer of energy from the mystic, the saint, this very high, level sage or whatever, yogis, and their frequency. And then we were just talking about how our frequency is so important on this planet. And but that doesn't mean that we can't become mystics and saints in our own right, here on earth. And that is part of what's asked of us, is to become spiritual masters while we're here on earth. And so many times we think, well, that's for someone else to experience. Like, no, you can experience it in this lifetime too. It's available for everyone and not just for the chosen few. And so I don't believe that Mother Teresa woke up one morning and says, okay, I'm going to start working on sainthood today. It was just already
Mm-hmm.
a part of her beingness. And because it was already a part of her beingness, it just exuded out. And therefore, because of that frequency, she moved into um, doing something really that made a difference. And actually, for many years, it was well hidden. The world didn't even know Mother Teresa even existed. They didn't know what she was doing in Calcutta. And for 4 years, she struggled, and she even said in her writings that the adversary came to her many times, many a night, and told her, "Quit. What you're doing doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference." All these different things, and she said she had to deal with the adversary quite often. And especially in those 4 years, she lived on donations, and she wasn't really effective as much as she wanted to be. And then, of course, the story comes where this reporter comes. I believe it was the New York Times. It was a very famous newspaper. And he was just trekking through India, and he happened to go into Calcutta and goes into a cafe and says, "Hey, is there anything noteworthy going on here?" And he says, "Well, we got this crazy nun who's scraping up all these half dead people and bringing them in, to this abandoned temple and trying to, save some of them or give them a peaceful death." And he was like, "Wow, that sounds like a great story," And so he says, I'd like to interview her. And they said, "Sure, sure, we'll show you where she is." And he interviewed her, and she'd been praying for years for financial support. And well, she made the front page news and the front page on the newspaper, and all of a sudden the Vatican opened up their coffers. Because she went to the Vatican and they said, no, we really are not interested in creating a new order. And because she was getting women from around the world that came in to want to be a part of this work,
Hmm.
and so it was definitely a movement. And but it's amazing how, because of the press, it actually made, the Vatican look bad. They said, okay, this will be our new poster child, and they funded her, and now and then she was later declared a saint. But so a lot of times when mystics and saints and sages and Mahatmas and yogis and all these different people step out in the world, they're not only are they not appreciated, they're just looked upon as just odd, because they're not the norm, because their frequency is so high on this planet. A lot of people can't even relate to it. And I think that's why, as we go along in our spiritual journey, a lot of people leave our life because it's not a frequency match, and they just can't relate to you anymore. You're just not worldly enough. And actually, that's a good thing. That's actually a good sign when you're on a spiritual path, and that you're seeing the transformation take place. And of course, your ego's like, oh my gosh, nobody's around left. I'm here by myself. And sometimes it's that way for a reason. We go into, whether it's seclusion or we take this time, instead of running out, we're now able to go inside and do self evaluation and do self reflection, do inner work, have time to do these spiritual readings and look at some of the what did these paths offer us. And I think that, for not for everybody, but for many people, that the higher you go, the more you can get into a very seclusion type life, because you need that time to rework and with your frequencies up so high. And then you kind of, it's like you go inward, have these experiences, whether it's deep inner mystical experiences using, raising these frequencies, and then you're set where you're now placed on an assignment. And so then people may or may not see you in the outer world. And I think that when you look at a lot of these mystics' lives, and these saints, that there was a period of time where there was deep growth. It was kind of like the caterpillar. You don't see the caterpillar when it's in that process. You only see the beautiful butterfly when it comes out of the cocoon. But a lot of what the most important part was in the cocoon, what happened in the cocoon. And that's so important. I think that a lot of spiritual students say, well, this can kind of be quite a drudgery. It's a lot of work. Yes, it's intense, because you're always on, you're always awake and aware. And you're always watching your ego. You're always watching your behaviors. You're always trying to stay as connected as possible and remembering and staying awake. And so this can build up a lot of heat in people. They start having these experiences on the inner and on the outer. And so but that is part of this deep journey. But it's almost like when you start to get to these higher states of being, you realize that you're not going to fit into society anymore. You're just not. And actually, that's a good thing. But our egos struggle with not wanting to just do what we used to be able to do, what's familiar, because we've changed so much that it's kind of like there's this adjustment period that people go through. And then once they finally realize, hey, this is who I am, and the family can look at you as odd, but that's part of, I'm sure that for a lot of these mystics and saints, their families didn't get them at all. And it wasn't until sometimes after they even leave the planet that they realized this was a special being. um,
Yeah, it's not easy being the first pioneer or the first one to break away from, the settlers and start another or branch out and go to another territory. It's not easy, but when you have a strong conviction, you do it because that's the call. You're having a call and you're okay with, okay, if this person or that person doesn't accept it, that's okay, because we do get past that. We get, oh, what do you know? But we do get past it, and that's the part of being a spiritual student and going to another platform. It's like, that's okay if they're not like me. That's okay if they don't agree with me. Let's just agree to disagree and part ways. But Nancy, we're going to end it here, and we're going to have you back on another episode. So everyone that's listening better like, subscribe, and share. Leave us a comment. Ask Dr. Nancy a question. We're happy to answer it. So in the meantime, tune in to keep it spiritually simple. Say goodbye, Dr. Nancy.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.